everybody, welcome into another Flyers game preview. I'm Kevin Durso. Tonight, the Flyers take on the Washington Capitals at 7 p.m. Before getting started, this video is brought to you as part of Flyers coverage on sportstalkphilly.com and the YWT podcast. Get all of your Flyers coverage over at sportstalkphilly.com. Follow me on Twitter at Kevin_Durso, and find more coverage from me over at 973ESPN.com, and be sure to listen and subscribe to the YWT podcast. Let's get right into it. And the Flyers come away with a win on Tuesday against the Buffalo Sabres, 5-4 in a shootout. Not the way that they would have liked to have gotten that win. It was certainly not the type of game that you expected against the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres are struggling badly right now, and it felt like an opportunity for the Flyers to kind of get some relief, to get a chance to build on something to move forward. Instead, it just turned into the opposite. The first period was awful defensively. They got a lot of scoring chances offensively, but only scored once. So they're down 3-1 at the end of the first period to a team that's lost 7 straight, doesn't have their best player. That's a total disaster. And you had to pull Carter Hart and go in with Brian Elliott there, and that worked out for the rest of the game. Elliott was really solid. He allowed one goal that went off of Shane Goss's spare stick first, so wasn't completely his fault, and then he was perfect from there on out. And the Flyers worked their way back, continuing to generate chances and continuing to play like the better team. But that's not as encouraging when you look at who's on the schedule moving forward, when you have to play Washington twice for the remainder of the week, when you have the Islanders coming up for 3 games. You really need to kind of get back to the basics of things and really start trying to figure out what you can do to improve, because it's just not working out right now, and it's a struggle, and it's the reason the Flyers are still below that cut line for the playoff spot. They have games in hand. It's not like it's a concern yet necessarily, but it is a concern based on their level of play, not necessarily the amount of time they have left. But they don't have a lot of time to figure things out, and luckily for them, one of the areas where they were able to win this game on Tuesday was special teams. They scored a power play goal to tie the game, and they didn't give up a goal while on the penalty kill, especially late in the game when it could have gone the other way. So the Flyers did do that very well, and now they get the chance to move forward and try to see if they can keep up with Washington this time around. They played a really strong first period against them on Sunday, and then it kind of fell apart as the fatigue set in again, and Washington really started to take it to them. Now they've got a chance to bounce back and play a better game, and hopefully they're motivated for it, because these are very important points out there, especially when you're playing against teams that are in front of you in the standings. Let's go to the goalie matchup for tonight, and we'll start with the Flyers. Brian Elliott is in goal. It's really no surprise. Carter Hart was just really down on himself. He didn't sound like himself, and it feels like he needs some time to work on himself individually, not necessarily in a game setting. There's not going to be a lot of time for that. They're going to have to go back to him at some point, but you give Brian Elliott the opportunity here tonight to see if he can keep you going. He's had a lot of success this season. Look at the 7-2-0 record in 11 games. That's outstanding, and he just seems to be in position to help the Flyers win games. The thing about Elliott at this point that really comes down to it is right now he's giving you the best chance to win games. That doesn't mean that Carter Hart's not the answer down the road, but you need to give him that time right now. And whether that's this one game, whether it's the rest of the week and the 2 games against Washington, which it very well could be if Brian Elliott's on the winning end of this game, if it's into the following week. But once you get into a back-to-back situation next week where they play the Rangers on Wednesday, the Islanders on Thursday, you're pretty much done at that point. You have no choice but to kind of figure out where you fit both guys in, because you can't overdo it with Brian Elliott. Not at his age, not with his injury history. You can't overdo it. So they're going to have to find a balance at some point. But for right now, at least for this game and probably the next one, I think you can figure you can lean on Brian Elliott until you get to next week, just to see if that gives Carter Hart the time to work on some things for himself. On the other side, Ilya Samsonov is in for Washington, and that's not a surprise either. He had an outstanding game on Sunday, made 36 saves, and he's been really good since coming back from a long time off because of COVID protocols and things like that. He's back, and he's playing as well as he has all season, and he just looks really sharp. And you kind of knew this was coming because the Capitals played Vitek Vanacek on Tuesday in the game between the Sunday game that they have against the Flyers and the 2 coming up. So it kind of sets the stage for Samsonov to jump right back in there, and I'm sure Saturday will be the same way, where whoever gives you the performance. If Samsonov struggles in this game for whatever reason, they may go to Vanacek. If not, they will stick with Samsonov and move forward and keep him going as the number 1 here. But ultimately, that's the way that it shakes out, and neither goaltending decision was that much of a surprise. Let's go to the players to watch for the Flyers. Travis Konechny happens to be his 24th birthday today, but He's had some success in the last couple of games since returning from the COVID list himself. Has only one goal, but could easily have 2 or 3 more than he has. He's got 4 points in the last 5 games, which is substantial as well. It's a step in the right direction for him. And as they continue, they're continuing to build a chemistry. Konechny is with his line mates Kevin Hayes and Scott Lawton. They're getting better with each passing game. Konechny seems like he's getting quality opportunities in almost every game and just not finishing on them. He could very well get that perfect one sometime soon, and maybe just one of these can open things up for him and really start to get his totals going, because he's been a dangerous player in the last few games. He just hasn't finished on the opportunities, and this is an opportunity for him to step in and really make a difference and be that player. On the other side, Alex Ovechkin, and the reason I pick Ovechkin once again for Washington is not because of the recent numbers, it's not because of anything like that, but on Sunday, he seemed like the guy who turned the tide for Washington in that game. After a certain point, when he got that goal that tied the game up at 1, that's when Washington felt like the game was really in their control, because it was back even. It wasn't like they were trailing in the game anymore, and now they had a chance to build on that, to get the lead, and then continue forward with it. And he was a presence on the ice. And again, one of the other things you can't overlook is right now, while the Flyers still are struggling on the penalty kill and struggling at special teams, even though they came out on the favorable end of that in Tuesday's game, you can't take away from the fact that Washington can just expose that again, especially if you get behind early in the game, especially if you take a lot of penalties. You're just going to want to stay out of the penalty box as much as possible, and you're going to want to, if they take a lot of penalties, because you got to admit, Washington took 4 penalties in Sunday's game, and the Flyers couldn't take advantage when they could have probably put a stranglehold on the game to some extent, going up by 2 or going up by 3, depending on how successful they were on the power play. If they would have had some success, maybe they could have turned that into something. Instead, they didn't, and Washington was able to come back. And while they didn't strike on the power play, per se, it still doesn't make a difference because you didn't take advantage of your power plays. So Ovechkin's a dangerous guy. If you can stay out of the box and avoid giving him that opportunity where he's standing in his spot at the left circle, you'll do it, and that's the big thing to keep in mind as you move forward in this game is always keep an eye on Ovechkin, always keep an eye on that top line that he's on, because Nicholas Backstrom's having an outstanding season. TJ Oshie stood out in the last game as well. He's just the catalyst of the line, though, because of his scoring potential, so that's why you want to keep an eye on him, as you usually do in these games. So that's going to do it for this Flyers game preview. You're going to want to check back after the game. Kyle will have a post-game video for you. I'll be back ahead of Saturday's game, also against Washington, with another game preview video. Until then, you can catch up with the latest episode of the YWT Podcast. Once again, be sure to subscribe to the YWT Podcast on YouTube to be notified of all of our game previews and recaps. Be sure to follow along during tonight's game. I'll have coverage over on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Game updates are over at Flyer-Delphia, and you can check back for my game preview and after the game for my game recap and 5 takeaways over at sportstalkphilly.com and 97.3 ESPN.com following tonight's game. With that, enjoy the game tonight, and we'll see you next time for the next Flyers game preview.